1905, New York.
Hi, Nemo. I've come to invite you to Slumberland. What? The princess has chosen you to be her playmate. Wow, really? But if she's a princess, then she must be a girl, right? I never played with girls before. She's not just a girl, she's a princess. I bet she's still a girl. Well, anyway, she asked me to give you this present. A present? Really? What is it? Candy. Oh, I like candy. Anybody smart enough to give me candy can't be all that bad. Even if she is a girl. Well, I guess I can go as long as I don't have to kiss her.
That oversimplification of the opening, 15 minutes of this movie brought to you by Capcom. Hello everyone and welcome to Let's Play Little Nemo, the Dream Master for the NES. I've offhandedly brought this game up here and again because I think it is actually one of the more overlooked Capcom games on the system. And in a moment that I didn't plan out when I originally wrote on my LP list, worth noting it actively shares a lot of development team members with Aladdin alongside several other Capcom games I've played over the years. Time for Dream 1 Mushroom Forest, where we're going to get our main tutorial from this friendly-looking guy. Hey, little boy. What are you doing here? This place is too dangerous for little boys. But if you've got your mind set on staying here, I should tell you a secret. Many of the creatures here will give you a ride if you feed them candy. You can ride for as long as you like. Press select to stop. Also, many doors are locked. You'll need to collect a different key for each lock in order to get through. By the way, my name is Flip. Regularly throughout the game's especially first half or so, the levels are going to start off with the character talking to you, giving an early hint for how to progress in the level, because the levels in this game are decently freeform, but also not at the same time. The big thing is, Nemo's only attack at this point is throwing candy. It can't kill enemies, but it can stun them. But there's several creatures that you can feed 3 pieces of candy to and it'll put them to sleep. Touching them from there will let you either ride on them or wear their skin as a suit for some reason and use their abilities. For instance, the frog here, which doesn't really look all too much like a frog, allows you to have a much higher jump, though you are noticeably heavier in the air than Nemo is on his own. The reason we're using the animal buddies as power-ups at all, though, is to find the main collectibles in the game keys, like the one that's going to be on top of this mushroom coming up here. There's roughly 5 or more of these in every single level, and you're going to need usually about 6 of them to actively clear a level. The reason is, at the end of every given level outside of the final level, there's going to be a door with locks next to it, and you need the same amount of keys as there are locks in order to clear a stage. And in most cases, there's only really ever exact change. There's only maybe 1 or 2 levels period in the game where there's extra keys, and that's because the keys in that stage otherwise are very missable. For the most part, you can find all the keys decently easily as long as you're not just gung-ho about only moving forward and exploring a lot of the little pathways around you. Here we got a very limited use animal buddy. This is the mole. By moving into dirt, you can dig through it as long as it's this specific type of dirt. Worth noting though, Nemo can take only 3 hits on his own by default, which not for nothing is pretty tanky for like a 4-year-old. But whenever you're actively equipped with an animal buddy, your HP increases depending on what the animal buddy is. Usually it'll only be an increase to 4 health points, but depending on the one, you might get upwards of 5 or 6. With that said, whenever you equip yourself with an animal buddy, so to speak at least, your HP doesn't automatically go up to the max that animal buddy has. You stay at Nemo's default 3 or whatever health point you're at otherwise, so you do need to grab healing items in order to get your health back up to max. Thankfully, they're decently regular in the game's levels, not for nothing. With that said, don't underestimate how easy it is to lose even those default 3 hit points. This is a decently hard game. I don't think it's Capcom's hardest game on the system like I've heard some people say it is. But if you're not careful, it's very easy to take a lot of extra deaths here. So this here is the Gecko Animal Buddy. This one can climb walls as long as you jump onto them. This can be outright walls like this or even certain trees in some levels. With that said, it doesn't have a way of defending itself. Not that there's many ways to do so in the game to begin with. There's only a couple of animal buddies that have an outward attack. And Nemo himself only has a slightly defensive measure of stunning enemies as we covered earlier. So you're going to be spending a lot of this game either worming your way around enemies, if not just outright staying out of their way. That's stage 1 out of the way at least. Wake up, Nemo! How many times do I have to call you? Stage 1's generally pretty easy, but it is where they really make you train yourself to actively explore the level rather than trying to go all the way through it. And moving forward, you gotta have that damn memorized.
Hi, Nemo. This is the Magic Flower Garden. You know, my friend Oopie wants to meet you. He lives under the water.
Worth noting, with characters like this actively appearing, this game is largely based on the entire movie aesthetically, but narratively it's only really the last, 20, 30 minutes or so, because that character in specific only shows up there.
Hi, Nemo. You're going to need the lizard's help to get through this next area. Look at the trees for him.
Well, thank you. I probably could have figured that out on my own, but it's nice to have the help. So worth noting, and we can see this a little bit coming up here, I've said that the candy can be used to stun normal enemies, and that is true, but more often than not, you only should do that if you're trying to get through a very small specific area here and again, as a lot of the enemies that are at least on the floor that move towards you are just tall enough where your jump arc won't carry you over them unless they're moving the opposite direction from you. Candy is definitely better against either smaller enemies should they exist or any airborne enemies like that fly though. This is probably the rarest animal buddy in the game. This is the gorilla. This allows you to not only actively punch and actively take out enemies, but it also allows you to climb walls and trees just like the lizard did. Which makes it very funny that we have to climb up here with this really cool gorilla just to grab the lizard again. With that said, it is because the lizard does have one benefit over the gorilla. It's that it's actively shorter. The lizard is only, I guess you could say, 1 tile high, whereas the gorilla is more like 2 or 3 counting Nemo on top. And in order to actively reach one of the keys for this level, we need to squeeze through a 1 tile high passageway that the lizard can actively get through. While we're on the way for that, I might as well explain my history with this game. If memory serves, this was a game I technically got introduced to by my brother when he introduced me to emulation, period, because he had an old, USB thumb drive that had, I think it was FCEU Ultra specifically as an NES emulator, with pretty much the entire library of NES games on it, at least the ones that were, notable over the years, and I tried this one. I think I got 2 levels deep or so before I just decided to go elsewhere. But when I came back to it eventually to finish it, I really enjoyed my time with this one. I don't think it's my favorite Capcom game in the system because it's kind of hard to top certain Mega Man games. But it's, I think, a Capcom game that really should be discussed more often, at least in a more modern sense at least. Mind you, it helps that Nemo itself is kind of a more niche IP. I'd say maybe for every 10 new people I meet across my life, maybe only 2 or 3 have heard of this series to begin with, let alone seen the movie. But it's something I really appreciate. I'm actually really looking forward to that new game that's coming out late March of 2026, so next week for me. Because it really looks like it's leaning into the dream stuff in a way that I find really interesting. But I'll save talking more about that for when I eventually probably do an LP of that game in however long. So, a few moments ago, and I've already discarded it, we got my favorite transformation in the game, the B transformation. That one not only lets you press the B button to attack with your stinger, giving you a long-range attack option, but it also outright allows you to fly for a short time period. When I first played the game, I thought it was an amount of A presses that you had for extra jumps or a distance. No, it is a time, so you can either rhythmically tap the A button to get a good distance in, or you can mash the ever-living shit out of that A button to really get as high as you can. I love using that transformation. Thankfully, it's in a lot of the levels in the game moving forward. That's stage 2. I generally actively find this one easier than stage 1 because I think enemies are a little less aggressive here, barring the flies. But we are moving into stage 3, which is easily my least favorite stage in the game. Nemo, why are you out of bed? Get back to your room this instant! So, Stage 3, the House of Toys, has easily the most keys in the game because 3 of them are outwardly missable. There are 9 here, but you only need 6, and it's a little foreboding that 1/3 of the keys we need are there as the screen loads in. You see, this stage largely takes the form of an autoscroller, and it's quite the lengthy one at that on this train. What makes this stage really rough is not only that deaths are very punishing because of the auto-scrolling nature, but also there's several planes trying to dive bomb you, there's going to be crushers trying to hit you with spikes, and also if you get crushed by geometry, that's just an outright instant death. And dying in a lot of this game stages is annoying to begin with, but especially in this stage because of the auto-scrolling nature. The thing is about dying in this game is that you keep any keys you've collected until you get a game over at least, but you're always sent back to the start of the stage because no stage in this game has checkpoints. That's half the reason, outside of the lack of active offensive option, I say you need to play this game very defensively. Play it slow, take it safe, there's no time limits to worry about, and just try your best to keep your health as high as you can. Like I said, there's plenty of healing items, but there's also plenty of enemies in relatively disadvantageous positions, frankly. This game's difficulty curve is actively a little weird, honestly, in that I'd say it generally rises until about stage 4 or 5, at which point it kind of stays the same moving forward. It's just that the stages either get longer, have keys placed in weirder places, or that's just what the end game is, which is a little bit different than the rest of the game to begin with. Now, you may have already pieced this together, but the reason this level has the most keys out of any level in the game is because 3 of them are along this auto-scroller. With that said, if you had to redo the auto-scroller in the case you missed one, they realized that would feel really bad. So, at the very end of the level, there's going to be an extra 3 keys just next to the door. So if you miss any of the ones along the way here, don't feel too bad. As long as you grab the 3 at the very start of the level, you will be fine. As we finish up the level, though, might as well talk about the game's plot according to the manual, which actively talks about the rest of the setting of the game, not just suddenly us going there to meet the princess. Little Nemo is invited to the royal palace by the King of Slumberland. Along the way, he has many adventures in a land where dreams are real and danger is everywhere. The good King of Slumberland has been kidnapped by the wicked King of Nightmares. Can you help Little Nemo rescue the good king and restore peace to the land of dreams? Why, yes. Yes, we can, because we're already about halfway there. Halfway there. Halfway there. Stage 3 is definitely pretty rough due to its auto-scrolling nature. I don't think it's the hardest stage in the game, but it's one that definitely annoys me every time I revisit it and make a minor mistake that leads to me replaying like half of it. Nemo, what are you doing? Go back to bed. I mean, I'm still in the bed. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm in bed. That's the exact same type of excuse I tried to pull on my parents growing up whenever I didn't want to go to sleep yet. It worked at least twice.
Hey, Nemo! If you share your candy with the hermit crabs, they'll take you where you want to go.
There's a part of me that wonders if the NPCs are actively here because they needed ways to explain mechanics and stages that playtesters may have missed originally, like maybe thinking the hermit crabs were enemies at first. The hermit crab only ever shows up in this level if memory serves, but it's a pretty fun animal, buddy. For one thing, you do have an attack with your claw, but when you jump, you actively flip upside down and can dig through the sand like with the mole. And you're pretty much completely invulnerable while you're doing so. There's mostly some keys just hidden near the sand, but in this case you actually want to dig all the way to the bottom of the screen and the center of this little pit here to find another little hidden area where there's a 1-up on top of a key, I believe. Extra lives are decently plentiful in this game, by the way. There's usually at least 1 or 2 you can pick up per level. The only thing I can never remember is whether or not if this is a game where if the count stops at 9 or if it counts beyond that but just doesn't show it. Because if I die a lot in this game, I basically never see the number 9 in it. If I don't die much in this game, I get the 9 and stay with it. What I'm effectively saying is this is a game at large where I either lock in and do great in it, or mess up completely. This is the fish animal buddy, by the way, the other rarest one in the game. Its big specialty is that it's surprisingly tanky and moves through water faster than anything else in the game, if other things can move in the water at all, like you may have noticed earlier in the part. When I was in the Bumblebee transformation and touched the water, Nemo started flailing about. That's because most transformations cannot exist in water, period. So if you actively flail about in the water for too long, I think you either just lose automatically or you might actually die now that I think about it. In either case, I always just instinctively press select whenever I hit the water, just in case. While I continue swimming about in this level and grabbing the remaining keys, let's start talking about this game's dev staff, as small as it is. There's actively only about 12 people on it, and we don't know the identities of 3 of them off the top of my head. The main game designer here is Tatsuya Minami under the nickname of Mickey. This was actively his first project, followed quickly by being a planner for the Super Nintendo version of Final Fight. He was a lead on Super Ghouls and Ghosts, an advisor on Mega Man's 5 and 6, a game designer on Mega Man Soccer, but shortly after that, in the mid-90s, he became a prevalent producer for Capcom. He produced the Super Nintendo version of Street Fighter Alpha 2, the bizarre technical marvel that is, the Saturn version of Resident Evil 1, pretty much every Mega Man game on the PS1, and was a prevalent producer for Resident Evil through the 2000s, even still being a producer, executive producer even, on Resident Evil 9. If memory serves, he's either an executive outright or at least one of the major employees over at M2 as well, which that's a smaller company that helps with remakes, ports, and emulations in general on the official end. What's gotten into you? Why can't you stay in bed? Why can't you make that a question? So, Stage 5, Nemo's house, is probably the most complicated level in the game in terms of just how up, down, and all around you really need to play this place in order to find all the keys. Nemo, I think we're in your house. You don't say. So what's really weird about this level, until we want to really realize what was going on here, we need to stay up towards the upper ends of it to find a lot of the keys to begin with, but specifically the stairs here can both be climbed on the actual stairs as well as the banister, and on my first playthrough it took me a while to realize I could actively get up to the banister to get up to this frog at all, so this level was actively really hard for me on my first playthrough. We're going to be changing to like 3 or 4 different animal buddies as we explore here, as there's also a bunch of enemies trying to get you, specifically a lot of snails climbing about, turtles that throw up eggs for some reason, and the bats. The bats are surprisingly annoying in this game. The way they work is that they generally will go diagonally from where they start, downward towards you. But if they get slightly above you, they actively just cut across horizontally from there, and if you try to rush a jump to avoid them, they'll just trap you with that. And with as little HP as you get in this game, you really want to be careful of that. By the way, because I haven't talked about it yet outright, the medical kits heal you to max HP, meanwhile the little bits of milk you can grab only recover, I believe, 1 pip of health. The next set of staff members for this game are the character designers, which in this case actively more means the artists. So they're the ones who did all the sprites, all the backgrounds, all that jazz. There's 5 people listed, and we only know the identities of 3 of them. There's Naoya Tomita as Tompon, Yoshifumi Onishi as Toshi-chan, Ieni, who we don't know the identity of, Natsue Ueda as Onatsu, and Oharu, who we also don't know the identity of. Starting off with Naoya Tomita, they were actively a pretty prevalent sprite artist at Capcom during the late 80s and early 90s. They actively started on the original Mega Man as such. They did work on Legendary Wings, Mega Man 2, Willow, this, and then they were on Mega Man 5 as an object designer, same with Mega Man 6. After Mega Man 6, though, his credits kind of dry up for a little bit until he was a development supervisor on Mighty Number 9. Oh boy, oh dear. Yoshifumi Onishi, on the other hand, is a much shorter credits list. They started actually with this game. Then they were on Buster Brothers for the TurboGrafx CD. Magical Quest starring Mickey Mouse, they were a character designer for. Mahjong Master on the N64, they did some CG work for. Sam Show 5, they were a cooperator on. What's interesting is that by date, their most recent active production role, at least on their main page, is on FMA Dual Sympathy on the DS. And on first outlook, that looks like all they've done, but if there's something I've learned about Moby games the last few years, it's that they're generally pretty good at listing things, but they're bad at connecting people who are the same person, like I mentioned back with Michiko Sakurai during my Kirby 64 LP, when they didn't connect her pre-marriage to Sakurai and post-marriage to Sakurai at all, roles-wise. The reason I bring this up is that there's both a Yoshifumi Onishi on Moby Games and a Toshifumi Onishi, who as far as I can tell are the same person, down to using the same nickname on Mega Man credits. Through that, they've also been an object designer on Mega Man's 4, 6, 7, the Super Nintendo version of Street Fighter Alpha 2, Power Rangers SPD on GBA, they were a producer, Kirby Squeak Squad, they were a designer, so they were with Flagship for a little bit there too as well. His most recent credits on that side of things are as a director of marketing on Shing in 2020, but the most recent role I recognize is being a designer for Little Witch Academia Chamber of Time on PC as well. The third sprite artist we know the identity of is Natsue Ueda, who I've actually talked about very recently, in fact, in the previous LP. They were a background designer for Disney's Aladdin as well as Mega Man 7, several PS1 Mega Man games like X4 and Legends, and their most recent credits involve things like the more recent Monster Hunters as an environment model or environment artist. I went into more detail back in Aladdin. Going into that 2 LPs in a row just feels redundant. So as you've probably noticed, we go all over the place in this house in this level. We go down to the basement to find the bumblebee and come up to the attic to find some keys, but in specific, after you grab some keys as the bumblebee, you want to head up here to the very top left of the house to find this passageway, which will lead us to our next animal buddy we need in order to actually get things done in this area. And this one's a little bit unique. The animal buddy up here is a mouse with a hammer. The hammer is actively an attack you can use, yes, but the main thing it does is actively destroy certain blocks in the level design. It can also climb walls like the lizard and gorilla, so this is arguably the best animal buddy in the game, barring the hornet. The thing is, though, actively hitting those blocks with the hammer can be surprisingly awkward. The hitbox to destroy them is not directly like in front of the mouse's face or in front of Nemo, it's kind of between the two of them. And while you can more easily take out enemies or the projectiles with the hammer, actively destroying the block you want to destroy can be tricky, especially if you're trying to do things in certain orders. Thankfully, you don't need to destroy blocks too often in the game. At most, I think you use it for that purpose maybe twice. But worth noting all the same. In specific, you'll see me coming up here when I destroy the blocks, actively trying to destroy ones that are lower here on the wall rather than higher up, so I can climb this wall and grab the key. That way, rather than needing to come back here with another bee we can grab in this part of the level design. As we wrap up this stage and thus the part, let's talk about one more dev team member, Junko Tamiya, who was the composer for the soundtrack. She was also the composer for the original Bionic Commando, Final Fight, Sweet Home, and Street Fighter 2010 alongside a couple of other games. She left Capcom shortly after this in Street Fighter 2010 though, largely being a stage and classical composer since then, basically never interacting with the gaming sphere outside of the occasional convention appearance with some old buddies from the old 90s Capcom days. And honestly, she does incredible work. Every single game she worked on in Capcom has incredible music. Although out of the games I listed there, I think my favorite of her soundtracks is probably Street Fighter 2010. Sweet Home is definitely a favorite of mine as well in some different regards, but it's also a very different type of soundtrack. By the way, this also had some of the most keys in the game at 7. You're gonna need a lot to finish this place off. Again? What does it take to get you to just sleep? Good question. I don't know myself. I stay up until 3 or 4 in the morning in most days. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 2, we're going to go finish off the game. See you guys then.